All right, here we go. Take one. Theories on the reason why people choose to use drugs is vast, as the medical field may define it as a reward deficiency syndrome, as this can be related to self-medicating, such as, living in a world of loneliness or a world where they don't feel wanted, nurtured, or even close to their family, society, and even to this world. As COVID-19 has been taking the lives of people close to us, we've been required to separate ourselves from everyone. And when someone dies in the hospital, they're alone. And a lot of them are unable to have any physical contact or comfort as these people pass away. Well, my guest today brings something that is, and I guess you could probably say, looked down upon by some, or even viewed as awkward by many. How important is human touch? Is there information that can back up cuddling as a therapeutic tool? Well, we're going to find out today. Please stand.
Darkness, we find the light. Memories soon inside. Yeah, we can make the fight. Darkness, we find the light.
My name is Eric McCoy, and welcome back to High While Clean. According to Aristotle, human beings are social animals and therefore naturally, seek the companionship of others as part of their well-being. Physical contact distinguishes humans from other animals, from a handshake, a hug, or, a pat on the back. We have developed an emotional expression through physical contact. I was thinking hard on this when I was working to, put this podcast together with my guest today. And I was thinking about, with not only COVID, but with all of our technology, we are sort of moving into this world where human touch is really in danger of becoming rare, if probably not obsolete. It's vital to preserve human touch in order, I believe, for us truly to thrive. There were a lot of stories where people became unrecognizable in the absence of touch. I'm going to tell a quick story real quick. About 200 years ago, and this was one of the stories I came across, there were French scientists. Now, there's some debate on whether this is all a true story, but they determined they had found an 11-year-old boy, and this kid was actually later adopted, and he was given the name Victor. And this boy had basically run wild in the forest for a lot of his childhood. And the scientists eventually concluded that he had been deprived of human physical touch, which had probably retarded his social and his developmental capacities. Now, my guest today, and her name is Epiphany. And so she brings an epiphany to this story, and I love this. Her name is Epiphany Jordan, and she is the author of Somebody Hold Me, the single person's guide to nurturing human touch. And she has a business, Karuna Sessions, which we're going to find out what that is located in Austin, Texas. In our communication that we had, she had informed me and kind of put in there that our culture currently considers touch between adults as romantic or sexual instead of part of health and of wellness. And she said it's a paradigm that isn't working for a lot of single and partnered people. Now, for those that know me, I love ideas, and Epiphany is going to bring about something radical and unique in what could possibly be a healing process. Epiphany, I want to thank you for joining me today.
Thank you much for inviting me, and that's a magnificent introduction. That was good.
Thank you. So let's talk about touching. All right.
Yeah, let's talk about this. Let's get right into it.
That right out of the gate sounds wrong, but I am about destroying stigmas. This
Awesome.
let us get high sounds weird to some, but here we are, high while clean. So tell me a little bit about your theories and your ideas about the power of human touch.
Well, I think the place that we have to start. I mean, this is a conversation that could go all over the place, but human beings evolved with touch. It's in our DNA. When we were cavemen, we slept in big piles for warmth and safety, and you had to have your tribe members, your clan members close to you in order to survive. Through the ages, that remained true as well. Like if you had grown up in a cold climate, even 100 years ago, you probably would have found your entire family sleeping in one bed in the winter to keep from freezing to death. And we also, without human touch, our young will not thrive or survive. Like about the first 18 to 22 months of our lives, our brains are forming all these different neurological pathways, and they've found that human touch can make the difference between whether you're calm, you're able to regulate your emotions, you can form attachments to other humans. And when babies don't get that, all sorts of different things can happen in terms of depression, addiction, anxiety, all these different things, lack of ability to form romantic connections, what have you. And so it's pretty well documented, and there's a fair amount of research on touch for infants and babies, but we haven't done a ton of it. There's a little bit of it out there, but we haven't done a ton of it about how it can help adults. And so I'm on a mission right now to redesign human touch. Like you said, this paradigm of equating touch with romantic or sexual relationships between adults doesn't work for a lot of people. And when we relegate touch specifically to those sorts of relationships, there's none available for support or comfort or relaxation or just physical rest. And I think that's not serving most of us well, and that we need to switch it around a little bit.
Yeah, kind of, when I was talking about the story of Victor, it sort of, kind of reminds me a little bit also of, we talk about like feral children, and reminds me of the story of the movie of Nell, right, with Jodie Foster.
Mm-hmm.
And how when she was ultimately brought in, just the touch of people, she started screaming and could not handle, because it's something that she was never used to.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think that it's such an individual thing. I mean, when you and I talked last week, we talked about this a little bit, but there's so many different factors that go into it. How you were raised is one of them, your religious upbringing, your culture, your personal biology and neurology, your relationships, your gender. There's so many different factors that go into it, and it's such an individual thing. And there are a lot of people who don't like touch, who don't need touch for various reasons. Some of them it's a biological thing, and then other people have had such horrifying experiences around touch, around getting touch that they don't want, that they just shut it all down. So the consent piece is very important as well.
You had asked me on the phone, about like my thoughts on or my experiences based on touch, and based on maybe my upbringing. And I didn't grow up, I mean, I grew up with a loving family, but I didn't grow up with a family that was a hugging family, or did a lot of touching in that aspect. And then, of course, I got heavily into drugs, which sort of removed me even further. Um, I'm not opposed to a hug or, things like that, but it's not a necessity for me. At
Yeah.
least that's the way I feel.
Do you have a partner that provides touch to you or for you?
I do. I'm married, and
Okay.
and I have a wife, and it is actually one of the topics that comes up. She's much more of that cuddling, wants to,
Mhm.
you know, and I love my wife to death. I will definitely, do it, but not as much as she would like.
Yeah. I actually one of my projects that I'm hoping to get to this year is to the first book I wrote was for single people, because if you're single, there's really no way, or there's very few ways to get that sort of touch, beyond just a hug, hello, or goodbye if you have friends who are like that. But I want to write a book about non-sexual touch for couples, because there's a lot of couples out there where it's like, I mean, it sounds like you and your wife have incredibly good communication around that, and that you recognize the differences. But for a lot of couples, when one half of the couple wants more touch than the other one, like non-sexual touch, and because they're stuck in that paradigm of sex equals touch as well. A lot of people will just shut down, because anytime their partner touches them, they're like, oh, they want to have sex, and I don't really want that right now. So, it becomes this thing that's very fraught, and hence my thing that it's not a good paradigm for people who are partnered as well. And it does. I think it's a really good thing for couples who are in romantic relationships to consider it as something that's separate from from their sexual relationship. It's like you can have touch without sex. You can't necessarily have sex without touch, but this idea that, oh, we can touch each other, and it doesn't necessarily have to lead to getting naked and rolling around on the bed, is a pretty mind-blowing idea for a lot of people, I think. But it's also one of those things, like my ex and I used to do that. Like if we were really stressed out, like one or the other of us would lay down and just do light touch. And usually by the end of it, we were in the mood, but it was a good transitional thing. And then sometimes not. Sometimes it would just be like, oh, okay, I'm really relaxed and I feel really good now. Thank you for calming me down. So.
Yeah, in the recovery world, hugging is a big thing that everybody always talk. You go to 12-step meetings, and maybe you could actually explain the power of what people may experience by doing this. I mean, this is I'm again one of the people that if I can go to 12-step meetings, I'm not the one that's running around hugging everybody.
Uh-huh.
But there are a lot of people that do, and
Right.
it isn't sexual by nature at all. And what do you think is happening by that?
One of the most innate human drives that we have is to feel like we belong, that we matter, that we're important, that we're seen, that we're understood, that we're part of a group. And touch is, human touch. When you touch another person, it's physical, tangible connection. And again, it's that thing where it's hardwired in our biology, where it's like somebody wants to hug me. I'm actually curious. Do you feel like it when you go to meetings and you're not the person who's hugging people? Do you have to say no to people, and do they respect that no? Or do you have a lot of people who are just like, oh no, I'm going to give you a hug and I don't care what you think?
Well, for me, and a lot of this comes from from practice. So I'm a counselor, I'm a teacher, and as a clinician, right? Working in a treatment industry. I've been clinical director, I've been program director, executive director, of different programs. And it's a battle that I've gone through with a lot of my staff because of interpretation. We always have to keep a separation,
Right.
from our clients. Nothing can ever be interpreted as being sexual. Now, people early in recovery, come from okay, I'm addicted to drugs, so there's a dependency. Now I want to move over to people.
Right,
It
right.
is, and that
Yeah,
is a battle that we go through with clients because you got a male and a female client that may be in the same program and then they just want to sleep with each other.
right.
And so I think for me, um, you know, with the fact that I don't need that, or at least I felt that I don't need that. And then also being a counselor and being, a director, that is a habit for me too.
Right.
And I've had clients come out, hey, can I give you a hug? No, I would give one hug to a client, and it's the time that they complete and they leave the program. And that was
Mm-hmm.
always my rule, was that, once you complete, I'll give you a hug, good job, and now you go.
Right,
Because I don't ever want it to be interpreted
right.
wrong, and the hugs would always be with other people in the
Mm-hmm.
room.
Right. I wonder if some of your female clinicians perhaps have a harder time with having their nose heard. I mean, there is a gendered thing, and you're coming at it from a position of authority. And there's other situations where, let's say you were the director of a program and you were a really touchy-feely, huggy person where the patient might not be able to feel like they could say no if you ask them for a hug because you're somebody who's up above them. I mean, it's really a tricky and delicate thing. I mean, the communication around it is, you can learn how to do it, but we don't learn how to do it, and we're not taught how to do it. And people don't have that understanding. It's like touch means something different to everybody. And I think too, I think part of the time you see, like you were talking about the two people in recovery who meet in a program and they want to sleep together. I mean, when you think about it, it's like if the only way that you can get that touch is through sex, then it's like what are you going to do? I mean, like even before the pandemic started, I got out of a long-term relationship about 3 years ago. And I mean, I have a few friends that I can go to, who know me and know what I do. And I can be like, hey, will you come over and cuddle with me? But, I mean, I get a lot less touch now than I did when I was in a relationship. I had that for 5 years. And now that I don't, I'm like, this isn't so good. So people who don't necessarily have that larger frame of reference, or that, hey, touch can be for different things, it's like, of course they're gonna dive in. I mean, I love sex. I think sex is great, but I think that there's probably a lot of people out there who might engage in hookup sex, not necessarily because they want the sex, but because that's the only way that they can get touch.
Yeah. So you do what's called Karuna session. So what is
A Karuna session is, we call it immersive touch therapy, and it's a ritual of human connection. It's done with two practitioners, which takes people out of that idea of, when you have a one-on-one, like if you went to see a professional cuddler, it would be a lot easier to misconstrue that it's a romantic situation. But with two practitioners and one client, they're like, oh, okay, this is really different here. So it's a ritual of human connection, and the client would come into our space and sit down, and one of us would come out and bless them, and then they'd shift and the other person would wash their feet. We'd have them meditate. We'd have them change into ritual garments. They'd come back out, and we'd kind of do a rundown of boundaries and ground rules, and telling them how we were going to proceed, finding out if there was, like, if they had any injuries that we needed to know about, or a part of their body that they just didn't want to have touched. And we would have them lay down on the bed and do very, very light synchronized touch. There would be, the two, me and the other practitioner. So, like we'd be touching the person's hand like this at exactly the same time, and it's kind of interesting because, it stimulates the right brain and the left brain at the same time. And it's like, how when you're getting them, I don't know, have you ever had a massage from two people, like a four hands massage?
Yeah.
Have you ever had? No, you're like, that sounds horrible. But, it's like when you're getting a massage and, you have one person giving you a massage, you can be like, oh, okay, right now that person's massaging my right shoulder. But when you have two people working on you, it's like your brain can't really follow what's going on. And, it's like it can't delineate. And I think after a time, it just kind of gives up and it allows you to get more into your body. So we do very light touch on the person's hands, head, face, shoulders and arms, feet, legs, belly, and heart. And then we would roll them over and do a little bit of light touch on their back. And then the meat of the session was we would put the client on their side and cuddle them in between us. So they were held in between two people. And it feels like being held by your mother as an infant, and your body goes, oh, I know what this is. I know this feeling. I'm safe. I'm cared for. I'm loved. I don't have to worry about anything because somebody else is taking care of me. And so we would do that for them for about 20 minutes. And at the end, they'd be asleep or a puddle of Jello on the bed. And we'd get up and tuck them in with a blanket and give them a few minutes to kind of let their body, their muscle memory reset with that. And then we'd get them up, ask them to change, and have them meet us on the couch for tea and cookies and send them on their ways.
And how do they feel afterwards?
Relaxed, blissful, grounded. One of the things that I found so amazing, I've been like, maybe we should like market this as a beauty treatment because people would look about 10 years younger. There was always this point that I could find in a session where it was probably about 7 minutes into the cuddling part where you just kind of felt the person let go, like all these little micro muscles in their body would just, and the one word that I generally use to describe people after their session was relieved. We worked on people, like we used to get referrals sometimes from sex therapists. So, like we worked with people who were late life virgins, people in their 50s or 60s who had never had sex, people who were getting divorced, or had gone through a bad breakup and they were grieving. Sometimes it was just people who were, they had a lot of responsibility in their life and they just wanted to be able to let go and not think about things and let somebody take care of them. Veterans really loved us. Actually, the demographic that really, really, really loved our sessions the most that I was really surprised about was new mothers, because we're doing for them what they're doing for their babies all the time. So it's like they've got all of this nurturing energy that just goes out all the time. And we're like, here, let us make a deposit into your nurturing bank, So it's like we would give to them what they were giving to their babies. And then it kind of, it gave them the opportunity to, go back and feel a little bit more refreshed because it wasn't just this one-way it wasn't just give. It allowed them to receive as well.
All right, we got to step back. I got a question here.
Sure.
Lifelong abstainers of sex.
Not necessarily lifelong abstainers, just people like lifelong virgins, they just never had an opportunity, maybe they were unpopular, unattractive, or shy, or, there's lots of reasons why, people don't always get to connect sexually, maybe when they were in high school and everybody was running around with their hormones. Maybe they just weren't feeling it like they really wanted, they wanted it in the context of a committed partnership, and they didn't have that opportunity, or, there's lots of reasons.
Wow. Now, how many do you ever get people that come in that have a different agenda?
It's funny that you say that, because, people often confused. They think that professional cuddling is a front for prostitution, just like they did when massage therapy became a thing. Everybody was like, it's not massage, you guys are like sex workers and stuff. But with our particular thing, like I said, with the 2 practitioners and 1 client model, it takes that dynamic out. But I mean, I've also had clients who came in, male clients, who were like, yeah, I was laying on the bed and I was like trying to take my thoughts into a sexual place, and I couldn't do it because you were just so maternal and so nurturing. We had 1 client that we had to fire because he got a little, like, he would be a little bit grabby with us. And, after we worked with him, we kind of came up with a protocol between the 2 of us, like nonverbal communication, that we were like, okay, if this is, how we're going to handle this in the future. But as a general rule, no. It's like the way that we set everything up with the ritual, it's very clear that it's not going to be a sexual encounter. It's like the person comes in and it's like, wow, there's these 2 women who are waiting on me hand and foot. I feel like a king, and these girls don't look like concubines. So, it's very different. It's a very different sort of setup. It feels, we make it very ritualized and sacred. It's not necessarily aligned with a particular religion or spirituality, but having that ritual structure, I think, takes people into a different place.
Yeah, I have friends of mine that go to massage parlors strictly for sexual relief.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of massage therapists out there who, who do happy ending massages, or who do use it as a front for sex work. And, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some professional cuddlers who kind of skirted that edge, but yeah, that was not our jam at all. So
your book now is one of the purpose of your book to kind of break that stigma, to sort of get more of the idea that cuddling or touch is not necessarily a sexual thing, and to help kind of fight the stigma? Or what is your book about?
So the book is about, it is to kind of break the stigma and get people thinking about it. But one of the biggest reasons that I wrote the book, well, there was a couple of reasons, because I had to, I was in that position of, all of a sudden I'm single, and, I was doing Karuna, so we were doing Karuna sessions at the time, but, I'm giving and not necessarily receiving. But one of the biggest reasons that I wrote the book was because, Karuna sessions was priced as a luxury service, and was like, not everybody can afford this, and a lot of the people who need it the most can afford it the least. But also just because, I noticed this place where, if you're not in a romantic relationship, then, and you're single, then you don't have a lot of opportunities to get touch. So I think what I do is, the first part of the book is going through and talking about touch. It's talking about like some of the cultural factors that keep us from sharing touch, a little bit of the history of touch. We talk about consent and boundaries, and different types of touch, and giving and receiving, all these different things. And then the second part of the book is basically a DIY workshop. And I think that the most important thing that it does is it's designed to be done with a group of your friends, with 4 people. And again, it's taking that idea like we have with Karuna sessions, that when you're touching somebody and it's one person and one person, that is usually how romantic or sexual encounters happen. So if you have a group of people, if you have 4 people doing this, then the touch becomes a social activity instead of a sexual activity, because you're not in a bedroom, and it's more like a bunch of kids playing. Everybody's like giggly and nervous, and God, this is weird, but everybody, you're with a bunch of people who are all thinking and feeling that same thing. And so the workshop part of the book takes you through a series of exercises that allows you to physically get progressively closer to the other person. So, like the first exercise is just touching hands. There's, foot rub, maybe touching somebody's hair or their head. And, then you get more into like the physically closer, and, you end up at the very end, it's like a one-on-one face-to-face hug. So, and the idea is, well, first of all, it gives you a chance to find out, oh, what kind of touch do I like, and because, most people they have no idea, because nobody ever asks us that, so it's like, you could be like, oh, wow, like I really enjoyed the sensation of having both of my feet rubbed at the same time, or it feels really good when somebody like does a little scratching on my forearm or something. So it allows you to kind of get an idea, or I like it when somebody puts their hand on my heart. So you get to play around with this and find out what you like and what you don't. But the other thing is that when you get done, then you have these 3 other people who now have a common frame of reference around this idea that touch doesn't have to be about sex. And so, you could easily, then you could call up somebody like one-on-one and be like, hey, you want to come over to my house tonight and we'll cuddle up on the couch and watch a movie? And they'll be like, yeah, because they know that that's what you mean, that it's not, that you're not like trying to bait and switch them or something. So it gives people a chance to, because it's like, most of us don't really touch our friends. I mean, it's most people, you can hug hello or goodbye when you see each other, but that's, let's say you go out to, for happy hour once a week with your friends after work, and you give them a hug, hello, or goodbye. I mean, that's not very much touch, and there's loads of physical health benefits to it. And, it's like most of us, I think, could probably use more free wellness practices, and we don't really think about touch as a wellness practice. So it gives people a framework to get their touch needs met. It teaches them how to get their touch needs met.
Yeah, I'm going to bet that with this process, with touching, or that there is neurotransmitters that are released. There probably is some dopamine that comes out. So
oxytocin as well.
And we're getting high then.
Oh, you totally are. I mean, I've seen, like, I used to throw cuddle parties for people, and at the end of a couple hours, everybody would just be like, yeah. I mean, they all looked like they were rolling on MDMA. I mean, seriously, people were just like grinning and goofy and laughing, and yeah, I mean, but they're actually, you have sensors in your skin that are specifically designed to register touch. And we have, there's something called affective touch, which it's like you can read when somebody touches you, like what their intention is. It's like, oh, that person's trying to be comforting, or, that person's trying to, hurt me or whatever. So, or, trying to express dominance or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's wired into our biology.
Now, since you're closed, obviously, with your store or your business, what are you doing now?
Do a new edition of the book. I think that I need to do another chapter or a section that specifically deals with COVID, because, I mean, everything that I've written before, it's like people tend to be kind of unconscious or careless around touch. Some people are, and some people are hypersensitive about it. And so there's always this process of kind of finding out what the other person wants and negotiating. But a lot of people don't do that. So it's like, the stuff that's in the book is still going to be very relevant in a post-COVID world. But I think that coming back from COVID, to a place where we can touch each other again, is going to add another pretty big layer of complexity against it, on top of it. And so there's that. And then I want to do my book about non-sexual. I want to write my book about non-sexual touch for couples who are in romantic relationships. And then last year, right before the pandemic hit, I was just starting to pitch a TED Talk about using human touch to cope with climate change. And I think I'm going to change the trajectory of that a little bit, and probably do it straight up about the future of human touch, because one of the things I've heard the pandemic described as is the great pause, where we're not everybody, but a lot of us are getting time to really reevaluate how we're living and what's important and what we value. And this is an area that feels very ripe for really rethinking it and doing it differently than we have been doing it.
Now, I'd ask you on the phone, I know you're in Texas. So for people that obviously don't live in Texas, where could you go and experience this type of stuff?
There's a few other people out there, I think, who do 2-on-1 cuddling, but there are lots of practitioners who are professional cuddlers. There's a Cuddle Sanctuary in the Los Angeles area that does it, and they're actually right now they're offering virtual cuddling sessions where you kind of do it online without actually being present with another person. There is Cuddlist, which is kind of a directory of people who've all been through the Cuddlist training, and they're all over the country. There's different practitioners. Some of them are storefronts, and some of them are just individuals who run businesses. Either they have a space where you would come to, or you would go to them, or they, so it just depends. There are cuddle parties that you can go to where it's kind of a group. It's like you go in and it's about 3 hours. The first hour is spent learning how to negotiate boundaries and navigate boundaries. And then there's 2 hours where, you would just walk up to another person in there and be like, hey, would you mind giving me a hug? And the person could say yes or no. You can always ask your, a friend or a family, I'm having a really hard time. Can you give me a hug? Or, when somebody's like telling you about an experience that they've had that's painful, you could say, when I'm trying to talk about this, it feels really good to have somebody have their hand on my shoulder while I'm talking, would you like to try that? Or, would you like me to hold your hand while you're talking about this? Or, there's lots of ways to do it that, that it doesn't necessarily take a lot of touch for people to feel seen and included and connected to another person. They've done studies where, what was it? There was one with a librarian where when the librarian was like checking people out, checking their books out, they would like just lightly touch the customer's arm. And that made a difference in how the customer perceived the interaction. So there's lots of ways to incorporate just a little bit of touch into your interactions that, obviously it's not as good as having, somebody like hold you for an entire hour, but every little bit helps, especially when you don't have a lot of it.
Yeah. Well, hey, I want to thank you very much for coming on here. And
yeah, thank you for having me.
I'd like you to, if you want to, share how people can maybe get a hold of you or information about your book and maybe your website.
Yeah. Sure. The website is www.nurturinghumantouch.com. And the book, Somebody Hold Me, The Single Person's Guide to Nurturing Human Touch. You can find it on digitally on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. There's a paper copy of it. There's an ebook, and there's also an audiobook that comes with some little downloads of the parts of the book where you might have to, where it would be helpful to have a physical piece of paper in front of you. And then let's see, you can follow me on Instagram at somebody_hold_me. I post images, or, I write stuff about touch as I think about it. Whatever ideas are like floating through my mind. And then there's I have a couple of different Facebook pages about the book and about Karuna sessions, where people can find me and follow me. And I think all those links are on the website. If they're not, I need to fire my web designer. I'm sure they are, though. So, yeah.
All right. Well, great. Again, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation, Eric. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to another episode of High While Clean. Please support our channel by subscribing, watching, liking, as we're trying to get messages out and ideas out to potentially help people. Again, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you soon. Thanks.
Give back your story.